Alright, hello, hi, how are you? It's a kind of a drizzly, rainy, cold evening in April today, and I thought I'd read some more from Carl Jung's The Red Book. Go out and get this book, it's great. This is my second time checking it out. And, you know, far be it from me to interpret Carl Jung. But anyway, he definitely drew some great pictures and mandalas. Yes, indeed. I like his ability. He could have definitely been an artist. This is one of my favorite ones. I'd like to have this for my own sacred office space. The Four Directions. Cool. Anyway. Well, where was it? Carl Jung wrote this in 1957. The years of which I have spoken to you, when I pursued the inner images, were the most important time of my life. Everything else is to be derived from this. It began at that time, and the later details hardly matter anymore. My entire life consisted in elaborating what had burst forth from the unconscious, and flooded me like an enigmatic stream, and threatened to break me. That was the stuff and the material for more than only one life. Everything later was merely the outer classification, the scientific elaboration, and the integration into life. But the numinous beginning, that which contained everything, was then. And Numinous, the Numina, Teilhard de Chardin spoke about that about a decade after Crowley, 1881 to 1955. So did Jose Arguelles. Talk about the Numina and the Numinous and the New Sphere. So, far be it from me to interpret Carl Jung. A little green before I start reading. But I think this numinous experience that happened to him was a mystical experience that kind of shattered his comprehension of earthly existence and opened him up to something far greater in depth, which I think happens to few people committed to spiritual and personal growth. Liber Primus, the beginning, the way of what is to come. If I speak in the spirit of this time, I must say no one and nothing can justify what I must proclaim to you. Justification is superfluous to me, since I have no choice, but I have learned that in addition to the spirit of this time, there is still another spirit at work, namely that which rules the depths of everything contemporary. The spirit of this time would like to hear of use and value. I also thought this way, and my humanity still thinks this way, but that other spirit forces me nevertheless to speak beyond justification, use, and meaning. Filled with the human pride and blinded by the presumptuous spirit of the times, I long sought to hold that other spirit away from me. But I did not consider that the spirit of the depths from time immemorial and for all the future possesses a greater power than the spirit of this time, who changes with the generations. The spirit of the depths has subjugated all pride and arrogance to the power of judgment. He took away my belief in science, he robbed me of the joy of explaining and ordering things, and he let devotion to the ideals of this time die out in me. He forced me down to the last and simplest things. The spirit of the depths took my understanding and all my knowledge and placed them at the service of the inexplicable and the paradoxical. He robbed me of speech and writing for everything that was not in his service, namely the melting together of sense and nonsense, which produces the supreme meaning. But the supreme meaning is the path and the way of the bridge to what is to come. That is the God yet to come, It is not the coming God himself, but his image which appears in the supreme meaning. God is an image, and those who worship him must worship him in the image of the supreme meaning. The supreme meaning is not a meaning and not an absurdity. It is an image and a force in one, magnificent and forced together. The supreme meaning is at the beginning and the end. It is the bridge of going across and fulfillment. The other gods died of their temporality. Yes, the supreme meaning never dies. It turns into meaning and then into absurdity. And out of the fire and blood of their collision, the supreme meaning rises up, rejuvenated, renewed. The image of God has a shadow. The supreme meaning is red and casts a shadow. For what can be actual and corporeal and have no shadow? The shadow is nonsense. It lacks force and has no continued existence through itself. But nonsense is inseparable, an underlying brother of the supreme meaning. Like plants, so men also grow, some in the light, others in the shadows. There are many who need the shadows and not the light. The image of God throws a shadow that is just as great as itself. The supreme meaning is great and small. It is as wide as the space of the starry heaven and as narrow as the cell of a living body. The spirit of the time in me wanted to recognize the greatness and the extent of the supreme meaning, but not its littleness. The spirit of the depths, however, conquered this arrogance, and I had to swallow the small as a meaning of healing the immortal in me. It completely burnt up my innards, since it was inglorious and unheroic. It was even ridiculous and revolting, but the pliers of the spirit of the depths held me, and I had to drink the bitterness of the draught. The spirit of the time tempted me with the thought that all this belongs to the shadowiness of the God image. This would be pernicious deception, since the shadow is nonsense, but the small, narrow, and banal is not nonsense, but one of both of the essences of the Godhead. I resisted recognizing that the everyday belongs to the image of the Godhead. I fled this thought. I hid myself behind the highest and the coldest stars. The spirit of the depths caught up with me and forced the bitter drink between my lips. The spirit of the time whispered to me, this supreme meaning, this image of God, this melting together of the hot and the cold, that is you and only you. But the spirit of the depths spoke to me, you are an image of the unending world. All of the last mysteries of becoming and passing away live in you. If you did not possess all of this, how could you know? For the sake of my human weakness, the spirit of the depths gave me this word. Yet this word is so superfluous, since I do not speak it freely, but because I must. I speak because the spirit robs me of joy and life if I do not speak. I am the serf who brings it and does not know what he carries in his hands. It would burn his hands if he did not place it where the masters ordered him to lay it. The spirit of the time spoke to me and said, what dire urgency could be forcing you to speak all this? This is an awful temptation. I wanted to ponder what inner or outer bind could force me into this, and because I found nothing that I could grasp, I was near to making one up. But the spirit of our time had almost brought it about that instead of speaking, I was thinking again about reasons and explanations. But the spirit of the depths spoke to me and said, to understand a thing is to bridge. To understand a thing is a bridge and a possibility of returning to the path. But to explain a matter is arbitrary and sometimes even murder. Have you counted the murderers among the scholars? But the spirit of this time stepped up to me and laid before me huge volumes which contained all of my knowledge. Their pages were made of one, and a steel stylus had engraved inexplorable words in them. And he pointed to those inexorable words and spoke to me and said, what you speak, that is madness. But the spirit of the depths stepped up to me and said, "What you speak is, the greatness is, the intoxication is, the undignified, sick, paltry dalliness is. It runs in all the streets, lives in all the houses, and rules the day of all humanity. Even the stars are commonplace. It is the great mistress and the one essence of God. One laughs about it, and laughter too is. Do you believe, man, of this time, that laughter is lower than worship? Where is your measure, false measure? Where is your measure, false measurer? The sum of life decides in laughter and in worship, not your judgment. I must also speak the ridiculous. You coming men, you will recognize the supreme meaning by the fact that he is laughter and worship, a bloody laughter and a bloody worship. A sacrificial blood binds the poles. Those who know this laugh and worship in the same breath. After this, however, my humanity approached me and said, "What solitude, what coldness of desolation you lay upon me when you speak such. Reflect on the destruction of being and the streams of blood from the terrible sacrifice of the depths to man." But the spirit of the depths said, "No one can or should halt sacrifice. Sacrifice is not destruction. Sacrifice is the foundation stone of what is to come. Have you not had monasteries? Have you not countless thousands gone into the desert? You should carry the monastery in yourself. The desert is within you. The desert calls you and draws you back. And if you were fettered to the world of this time with iron, the call of the desert would break all chains. Truly, I prepare you for solitude." Pretty good so far. I like the way he writes. After this, my humanity remained silent. Something happened to my spirit, however, which I must call mercy. My speech is imperfect, not because I want to shine with words, but at one of the impossibility of finding those words, I speak in images. With nothing else can I express the words from the depths. The mercy which happened to me gave me belief, hope, and sufficient daring, not to resist further the spirit of the depths, but to utter his word. But before I could pull myself together to really do it, I needed a visible sign that would show me that the spirit of the depths in me was at the same time the ruler of the depths of world affairs. It happened in October of the year 1913, as I was leaving alone for a journey, that during the day I suddenly overcome in broad daylight with a vision. I saw a terrible flood that covered all the northern and low-lying lands between the North Sea and the Alps. It reached from England up to Russia, and from the coast of the North Sea right up to the Alps. And I saw yellow waves, swimming rubble, and the depths of countless of thousands. The vision lasted for 2 hours, and it confused me and made me ill. I was not able to interpret it. 2 weeks passed, then the vision returned, still more violent than before, and an inner voice spoke, "Look at it. It is completely real, and it will come to pass." You cannot doubt this. I wrestled for 2 hours with this vision, but it held me fast. It left me exhausted and confused, and I thought my mind has gone crazy. From then on, the anxiety toward the terrible event that stood directly before us kept coming back. Once I also saw a sea of blood over the northern lands. In the year 1914, in the month of June, at the beginning and the end of the month and the beginning of July, I had the same dream 3 times. I saw in a foreign land, and suddenly overnight, and right in the middle of summer, a terrible cold descended from space. All seas and all rivers were locked in ice, and every green living thing had frozen. The second dream was thoroughly similar to this, but the third dream, at the beginning of July, went as follows.